Hello from our home. I was to make this talk at the gallery, but of course now, like most of us, we're at home and only going out for essentials. So welcome to my talk on my mother, the Melbourne artist Mary Macqueen. She was born in North Carlton, Melbourne in 1912. That's near the university and the zoo. She went on to live most of her life in East Kew, which is the home I grew up in and was the scene you saw prior to this talk. Her grandmother, my great-grandmother, Mary Macqueen Ballantyne, was very gifted at drawing. This is a drawing of hers circa 1861 and is in the exhibition. Sadly, she died giving birth to mother's father, my grandfather, her only child, 1 month after her arrival from Dublin. That was sadly a common occurrence in that time. My grandfather, her father, was a stonemason and built the Kew World War I War Memorial at the Kew Junction, which you can see here at the opening. I start here because mother identified with her grandmother, and this guided her wish to become an artist. Mother enrolled in a commercial art course at Swinburne Technical College, only to become engaged at the age of 17 to my father, Alan Macqueen, an accountant and widower with 2 sons. He was the son of a Presbyterian minister and founder of the East Kew Presbyterian Church. He was a senior member of the Presbyterian congregation, and getting engaged to a 17-year-old art student was really food for gossip then, probably would be now. They married in 1930. She was then 18. This was the beginning of the Great Depression. First her father became bankrupt, then her husband. Mother went on to have 3 children between 1931 and 1935. Depression times were hard and there was no time for art. In 1939, confined to bed with the flu, a neighbour brought in roses and the desire to draw returned, which then led to teaching herself how to use watercolours. It was 1939 and the Herald had an exhibition of French and British contemporary art. It caused a real stir. As you can see from this article or poster, it seems Melburnians were not ready for it. Mother was, but unfortunately she did not see it. She later said, had she seen it, it would have inspired her to different styles earlier in her career. Exhibitions and lunchtime lectures at the National Gallery of Victoria and GB lifted her out of a suburban housewife's world. Until the late 60s, the NGV was in the State Library of Victoria, as you can see here, before it moved to its new digs. She was starting to take tram trips to town and drawing houses and buildings. She would bring them home and work on them and discard them if she wasn't happy with them. She joined the Victorian Art Society in 1945 and had her first one-woman show, mainly of houses with some landscape. There was a good response from critics and the public. There was even a write-up in The Truth, the tabloid at the time, and they said that the painting sold like hotcakes, and apparently they did. Mother went on to have lessons from Sir William Dargie. This is a portrait by him of Lieutenant General Edmund Herring, DS. This was before he left the country as a war artist. This now is World War II. They were of great value, especially technically. She was then advised to do a drawing a day, and in this way she developed the ability for pure line drawing. She drew shirts hanging out of drawers, boots, socks, unmade beds, vegetables, husband asleep, anything. And a little later, a lot of me and my cat Timmy, which are also here. In 1946, she took drawing lessons from George Bell.
Yeah, I went to George Bell, but it was really uphill going to George Bell, because it was the intuitive fighting the intellectual, and it was wasn't any good. But he really did teach me to understand Cezanne and Dufy and Matisse. He taught me to understand the moderns, yes, which was terribly important. Yes. The fact that I couldn't draw his way, the form, because I drew by feel and he did by intellect. So, but I learnt quite a lot from George.
But lessons came to a halt with the birth of her 4th child, me, in 1947. I liked ice cream. My memory is good from early 50s. She was one of the official artists of the 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games and got a bronze medal for doing so. I remember the billiard room with the top on the billiard table and Father cutting mounts and making frames in his workshop for each exhibition. It was a wonderful environment to grow up in, which I appreciate as I could see the difference in my friends' homes, most of which did have Mary Macqueen lithos on the wall. My father retired in 1955 when I was 7. Mother was starting to build a name, so I remember well going to openings of her exhibitions and eventually being old enough to drink dry sherry, which was the drink of choice at openings in those days. Two that stand out in my memory was one when Sputnik came over in 1957 and the other was the Beatles hit Melbourne. And these were on the same day, and the crowd for the Beatles was just remarkable, as you can see here. It was 1964. She thought of her life in decades. The early 50s were rough with a toddler, me, and teenagers, most of ours almost impossible. But later in the 50s, with the rebirth of printmaking in Melbourne, she joined a class of lithography at RMIT, and a new world opened. She had permission to use RMIT presses for printmaking, but she needed her own press. Her brother, an engineer, converted a sheet pressing manual, and now she could print at home.
My lithographic works were all done in this room because the press started off as a manual and was gradually developed into what became a very good press. And all the lithographic works were done in this room. The press was here and the table was there, and I had walked backwards and forwards and put them all across there and all across the floor and across the floors out.
She went on to teach at Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, RMIT, first as an arts and crafts for 3 years and then life drawing in the architecture school for a further 10 years. Her first state gallery purchase came up in this period in 1956 when the director of the Art Gallery of WA purchased some of her lithographs. She went on to exhibit in the Australian Print Survey 1963-64, organised by the Art Gallery of New South Wales. That was followed by Australian Prints Today at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, USA. In the 60s, the ability to draw animals became apparent while visiting small zoo in the Stony Rises. She began visiting the Melbourne Zoo regularly and was sketching all the time, and in my memory, she just was sketching and sketching and sketching. Practice makes perfect. Sales were now happening, and she sold works to both the WA and South Australian galleries. My father was proud of her and helped, encouraging in every way possible, like making the frames and the mounts. In the latter half of the 60s, when both my grandmother and my father were in failing health, they both spent their last days in Mount Royal Hospital for the aged, with my father ending his days there. Mount Royal is near the zoo, and Mother spent many hours drawing animals there. She was born in North Carlton, as I said, near the zoo, and grew up with the sounds of exotic animals, lions and elephants. A lot of pure line drawing time was spent there. A good pure line drawing takes every ounce of concentration and effort and is a rare achievement, she said. Her work at this time was mainly lithos of animals drawn at the zoo. She became known through lithographs as lithos were circulated more widely, but art galleries also became interested in her pure drawing and mixed media works on paper. Here, this was articles that were in the Vogue magazine about her work on paper. The late 60s and early 70s, a period I remember well, as the two of us were home alone by then. My father went into Mount Royal Geriatric Hospital in 1968. He was 82 then, and he died in 1970. Mother was getting very busy, and the director of the National Gallery of Victoria, James Mollison, really liked her work and encouraged her. As a sidebar, Pam and I were attending an opening at the NGV some years ago, and I saw James Mollison in the crowd. He was director of both the NGV and the National Gallery of Australia during his career. He was responsible, along with Scott William, for the purchase of Blue Poles by Jackson Pollock, seen here with Robert Hughes. and the blue poles still in the box, or getting out of the box. Anyway, I went over and reintroduced myself to see if he remembered me. He said, "Remember you? I have a sketch of you on my wall at home." That was a real buzz. Unfortunately, James Mollison passed away recently, and this is from an article about it with Gough Whitlam when the blue poles were happening. Melbourne was really starting to become what it is today. It was an exciting place both for me in music and Mother in art. This marked the beginning of a new era for Mother. With money financed by her mother's estate, she set forth on a world trip. This was the first of many. She did further trips staying with her sons in various parts of the world and used those visits as her base, including us in Palm Springs, California. Here she learned to love the desert, and flying over the desert, e.g. over Palm Desert. This is a companion work to Desert One, which was purchased by the National Gallery Victoria. She went on to visit Africa and was then able to sketch the animals she had come to know so well in the home habitat in Kenya. In 1976-77, she discovered Nepalese paper, and a new world opened. She would be alone in the summertime in the studio, moving about the house, observing things, she said. Gradually a deeper sense of consciousness emerged, moving papers, making marks with pencils, pastels, brush and ink, a little cutting out or tearing, here and there, and then paste. This process, a work on paper, could take months to complete.
After winning numerous and important prizes and awards, one of Mary Macqueen's finest achievements was creating the winning design in 1984 for the 4 tapestries to hang in the ANZ Pavilion at the Victorian Arts Centre in Melbourne.
Oh, that was a straight out letter, a letter from the powers that be at the Arts Centre, actually, commissioning 5 artists to produce one idea of a suite, for a suite, in the foyer of the ANZ Pavilion. And there were 5 artists asked. That's a sort of standard 5. So I was one of the 5. One dropped out. He wouldn't have been right. When I read the commission, and John Truscott was the one who was responsible for all that, and I had read what he wanted for that particular suite. It really was right on my wavelength. It was, I had ideas, I had drawings, and actually I took in the drawings. We had to go in one day with one. We only had to do one idea, but we had to be prepared to develop it into a suite of 4 if we happened to be the chosen one, and we had to be prepared for that. And I took one idea in and some photos, and then they rang out of the blue one morning, and I was the only one left, or two left. And they rang and they said that Sue was going to England to see a theatre designer about doing it. And I thought, it's all, it's like you, Peter, you had a job with ABC before it was even advertised. And I thought that this chap would have had it before they even asked us to do them. It was just they had to ask 5 and that was it. But this other chap was quite sure he was going to get it. And he flew out and with all his works, and I got it. So that was it. There wasn't any idea of him getting it, which was a lot of silly nonsense because it probably cost him a lot of money. And so no, I didn't know what they do. I knew nothing about tapestry. But still, it worked magnificently because they were quite dedicated, and it was a new job, a new type of job, And they spent an enormous amount of time. They dyed special colours and things like that. And then Yashka Maya, she wanted the harbour. Then Anna Murdoch thought she'd have the harbour too, but we didn't do. Anna Murdoch's didn't come off. Dame Elizabeth was hoping for it, was her daughter-in-law. But what's his name's wife, Rupert's wife.
This exhibition is dedicated to her and all her work, and I hope you get an opportunity to see it when the gallery opens again. Thank you.
But your mind must be alert.